last story the night she died. She made me promise I would never tell it. Not because it was embarrassing, not because it was painful, but because, in her words, stories like this don't stay on the page, they listen. I laughed when she said that. She was weak, half asleep, dying. But then she grabbed my hand harder than I thought she could and whispered, "If you ever repeat it, it will know you remember." She died less than an hour later. I kept my promise for 3 years, until last night I heard my childhood nickname spoken in her voice from the hallway of a house that's been empty since the funeral. That's when I realized something my granny never said out loud. She didn't tell me that story to warn me. She told it because she was tired of being the only one who knew it. And if you're listening to this right now, I don't think I'm alone anymore. Before that night, my granny was the safest person I knew. She wasn't the kind of grandma you see in greeting cards. No soft piano music, no perfect smiles. She was sharp, honest, a little rough around the edges, the kind of American grandmother who believed in hard rules, strong coffee, and stories told after the sun went down. When I was a kid, I stayed at her house almost every weekend. Same house, same creaking floors, same porch light that flickered like it might give up at any second. And every night, without fail, she'd sit in her old rocking chair and tell me stories. Not fairy tales, not happy endings, stories about people, mistakes, things you learn too late. I used to fall asleep to the sound of that chair rocking, wood against wood, slow and steady, like nothing bad could ever reach me as long as she was there. But something changed when I got older. The stories stopped. At first, I thought she just ran out of things to tell. Then I noticed she avoided certain rooms at night, especially the hallway mirror. If I caught her passing it after dark, she'd turn her face away, like she didn't want to risk seeing something looking back. She also started locking the spare room, not because anyone was in there, not because it was valuable. She just said, "Some things don't like being remembered." I laughed it off. Adults always say strange things when they get old. But then there were the rules. No talking after midnight. No answering if someone called your name from another room. And if you heard the rocking chair moving on its own, don't look. Even then, she never sounded crazy. She sounded tired, like someone who had been guarding something for a very long time and was terrified of slipping up. That's why when she asked me to sit with her on her last night, I didn't think I was about to hear a horror story. I thought she just wanted to tell me one last thing she loved. I didn't know she was about to give me something she had been carrying her entire life. The night my granny decided to tell that story, the house didn't feel the same. It was quieter than usual, not peaceful quiet, but the kind where every small sound feels like a mistake. The hospital bed had been moved into the living room earlier that day. She said she wanted to die facing the front window so she could see if anything tried to come back. I didn't ask what she meant. Outside, a storm rolled in slow and heavy. Not thunder at first, just wind dragging branches across the roof, like something testing its weight. She looked small in that bed, smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were clear, too clear. When I sat beside her, she didn't smile right away. She watched the hallway behind me instead.
Then she reached out and wrapped her fingers around my wrist, not my hand, my wrist, tight. "Listen to me," she said, not softly, not kindly, like someone giving instructions before a fire spreads. She waited until I nodded, then she said, "I'm going to tell you one last story." I told her she didn't have to, that she should rest. Her grip tightened. "No," she said, "if I don't tell you now, it won't let me die." That's when I felt it, the shift, the same room, the same furniture, but suddenly it felt like we weren't alone anymore. She made me promise first, not the casual kind of promise you forget later. She made me repeat it back to her. "I will not tell this story. I will not write it down. I will not say it out loud, ever." When I finished, she closed her eyes for a long moment. I thought she had fallen asleep. Then she whispered, "Good, now it has to listen." The lights flickered just once. She began slowly, not like a bedtime story, but like a confession she had been rehearsing for decades. She told me about this house, not as it is now, but as it was when she was young. Same hallway, same mirror, same rocking chair, and another old woman sitting exactly where she was now. "My granny told me a story too," she said. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes never stopped watching the dark at the end of the hall. As she spoke, the storm outside finally broke. Thunder shook the windows, and for just a second I could have sworn the rocking chair moved, even though no one was sitting in it. That's when I realized something I still can't explain. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of running out of time before the story finished telling itself. My granny didn't call it a ghost story. She didn't call it a curse. She said it was just a story that learned how to stay alive. She told me she was about my age when her own granny first shared it with her. Same house, same chair, same promise made under the same flickering light. Back then, the story sounded harmless. It was about a woman who lived alone and started hearing her name at night. Not shouted, not whispered, spoken the way someone talks when they're sure you'll answer. At first, the woman ignored it, but the voice kept learning. It learned her schedule, learned the way she breathed when she slept, learned which memories made her feel safe, and one night it used her childhood nickname. Granny paused when she said that. She swallowed hard and looked at me like she was measuring something. "That's the first rule," she said. "Never answer if it uses a name from before you were grown." The woman in the story answered anyway, and that's when the voice stopped staying in the walls. It started sitting in chairs that hadn't moved, in rooms that smelled familiar, in memories that felt warm but wrong. The voice didn't threaten, it didn't scream, it told stories. Stories about the woman's life, things no one else should have known, regrets she never said out loud. "That's the second rule," my granny said quietly. "Never repeat the story out loud, because every time the woman did, the voice remembered it better than she did. It started correcting her, finishing her sentences, changing details, small ones at first, until the story didn't belong to her anymore. Granny told me the worst part wasn't fear, it was comfort. The voice sounded like someone who loved you, someone who missed you, someone who understood how lonely a human life really is. "That's the third rule," she said. "Never never let it know you're afraid of being alone, because the moment it knows that, it stops pretending. In the story, the woman lived a long life. People came and went, houses changed, faces aged, but the voice stayed the same. It aged with her, learned patience, learned kindness, learned how to wait decades for the right moment. Then my granny said something that made my stomach turn cold. She said the story always ends the same way. The voice doesn't take you. It doesn't replace you. It waits until you tell someone else the story, and then it moves on. That's when she finally admitted the truth. She hadn't learned this from her granny's story. She learned it from her own life. She broke the first rule as a young woman. She broke the second one when she was scared, and she spent the rest of her life obeying the third. It stayed with me, she said, not angrily, not bitterly, like someone talking about a chronic illness. It never hurt me, it just waited. She told me that's why the story stopped, why the mirror was covered, why the chair was never empty for long. She wasn't protecting the house, she was protecting everyone else. Her voice dropped to almost nothing when she finished. I didn't tell you this to scare you, she said. I told you because I love you. And then she added, but love doesn't stop it from needing someone new. The air felt heavier after that, like the air had been listening and finally understood its cue.
My granny's final words still echo in my head. When I'm gone, it'll try you next. I laughed nervously. I thought she was just old, forgetful, playing with words. But then she died, quietly, peacefully. For the first hour after, I felt relief. Relief that it was over. Relief that the storm had passed. Relief that I had kept my promise. And then the sound came. A soft voice, whispering my childhood nickname. I froze. Every instinct screamed, "Do not answer." But part of me wanted to. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. My granny wasn't warning me about the story. She was telling me the truth about the rules. Rule 1, never answer when it calls you by a name from the past. I hadn't answered yet. Rule 2, never repeat the story. I had broken that by thinking it out loud, trying to remember. Rule 3, never let it know you fear being alone. Too late. I was shaking. My pulse was deafening. The room felt wrong. The shadows thicker. The rocking chair moved again. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My feet wouldn't obey. And then I saw it. Not a figure, not a ghost, not even a shadow, just presence. The kind of presence that watches every mistake, that remembers every secret, that waits. And I knew this was the moment my granny had warned about. But the thing about the story is, it doesn't take you immediately. It waits, it observes, it listens, and it learns exactly how you think you can hide. And here's the worst part. It already knew I was scared. It had waited decades not to harm her, but to find me. And now it had. I wanted to scream, to run, to grab anything that would give me safety, but I couldn't, because I had already broken the rules.
just like that, I understood what my granny had meant. This wasn't about punishment, it was about inheritance. The story needed someone new, and somehow, unknowingly, I had volunteered.
I sat there for hours. The storm had passed, but the house didn't feel empty. The silence wasn't comforting. It was waiting. My granny's bed was still warm, her chair still tilted from when she leaned on it, and I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. It will try you next. I had kept her promise for 3 years. 3 years of avoiding certain rooms, ignoring voices, and never speaking the story out loud. But in that moment, I realized I had already failed. Not because I had broken the rules consciously, but because simply listening made me part of it, part of a chain I didn't ask to join. My heart ached, not just for fear, but for her, for the granny who had carried the story through decades. She had lived in a world of invisible chains, guarding a secret no one should bear, protecting everyone else from what she could not control. And I had been the one she loved most, the one she trusted to inherit it. Guilt wrapped around me tighter than the blanket I hadn't noticed I was clutching. I whispered into the empty room, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I'll try to be strong. I'll try to protect everyone too." But the truth is, I already felt it following me, watching me, learning me, waiting. I don't know if I can ever escape it. And now, as I record this, I can't help but wonder, am I telling this story to warn someone else, or am I unknowingly passing it on? Because the story doesn't care about age or love or guilt. It only cares that it survives. And if you're listening to this right now, it may already be listening to you too. The chair has stopped moving. The hallway is dark, and yet I feel it. Not in the shadows, not in a whisper, but in my chest. A weight, a memory, a presence I can't shake. My granny told me one last story before she died. She begged me not to tell it. I promised, and I failed. Because stories like this, they don't end when the last word is spoken. They live in the quiet. They listen to your heartbeat. They wait until someone new is ready. And now I think it's ready for me. Maybe it's ready for you too. If you've listened this far, I don't think you're alone anymore. The story doesn't need eyes to see you. It doesn't need hands to touch you. It only needs someone who will hear. And now it has. Some stories aren't meant to be told, but some stories